Well, good afternoon, friends. So wonderful to be in Ottawa finally after talking about it for months and planning with our friends cross-border. It's a very impressive gathering that's been pulled together here, and I'm really honored to share a platform with Clive Doucette and Jessica Lax. I have to say I was really inspired by both your stories because of the reminder of the importance of connecting on such a deep level to community and to not just our immediate community but our wider community. And the emotions that come and are related to that kind of connection are really what make life worth living. They give it vibrancy, and I'm reminded of an issue of Yes magazine that had a cover story on vibrant cities, because it was highlighting some of the things that people were doing to make their cities come alive and to celebrate what cities have. I was reminded of that when Clive was talking. And when Jessica spoke, it had a personal resonance with me because I also have spent some time in Kenya. My brother, Dave, lives there, and he's worked in development in Africa for his whole, for the past 20 plus years. And I had the pleasure of going to visit him following the World Summit on Sustainable Development, which is in Johannesburg. And I couldn't be on the African continent and not go to visit my brother, who I'd never been to see before. I almost can't talk about it because, pardon me. Well, when I was in Nairobi, I visited the slums. Has anybody been to the slums in Nairobi here? I know some of you have. You know what I'm talking about. My brother had a friend who was doing a development project in Nairobi's worst slum. And through him, we were able to go in and visit with some of the women that had been empowered through this development project. And walking into that setting was really like nothing I had ever dreamed of. It was the color was black and brown. It was damp. It was filled with garbage. And houses were made from corrugated tin, if they were lucky, cardboard, scraps of wood, packing crates. There was no running water on the homes. They were thousands of families living out of a tap. The sewage was all flowing through trenches in the middle of the pathways that were their main thoroughfares. And in those trenches were children. In the middle of that slum, we, I apologize, we met with some women that had been engaged in a development project. They were given video cameras, and they would record life in the slum. And life in the slum was reported through their stories to the wider community, who had no inkling, no experience with what it was really like living there. And it was told through their eyes. Anyway, through their various efforts, these women had really taken charge of their community. They had gained a sense of pride and ownership and a sense of possibility that change could be made through their actions. there was a remarkable contrast in that experience because these women, in the midst of the filth of the slum, were dressed spotlessly in clean ironed clothing, simple but clean. They took us into one of the shacks that one of the women lived in. We went in, and literally the ceiling was about as high as my head. It was very small. They welcomed us in. We sat on couches that were set in a circle and chairs and things. Someone brought in a tray of sodas. There was one light bulb in the ceiling. We sat there and talked. We laughed together. They laughed. They were upbeat about the possibilities that they saw for life in their slum. And they took us down one little alley to a children's daycare center that they had started. It was a room literally as big as about 3 of these tables with 40 kids in it. It was incredible. But they were all in there. They sang. Their teachers certainly had a sense of pride in what they were doing with these kids. So all that to say, and that's not how I had planned to give this talk, but it touches on what has been mentioned by my colleagues here so eloquently, of the importance of spirit and connection and possibility and hope and community. So, I also would like to tell a few stories. One story that really moved me when I was getting started in this work of connecting faith communities to environmental action was the story of people who lived off the shellfish industry in the Chesapeake Bay. There were about 700 families living on 700 people living on Tangiers Island, a very small island in the Chesapeake. And let's face it, they were not living an environmentally sound existence. They were really they were trashing the environment in the practices that they had established. And it was kind of surprising to hear that for years environmentalists, quote unquote, had tried to get the watermen of Tangiers Island to change their practices, to make the bay more sustainable and their industry more sustainable for themselves, and also just to protect the bay at large. And these people, residents of Tangiers Island, were very conservative, and they looked at the enviros as being kind of radical and not interested in their own welfare. So after countless tries at trying to come together and create a more sustainable future, a young woman who was a doctoral student in theology, and I apologize, I've forgotten her name because I had it in my notes, but it's not accessible right now, but it doesn't matter. She took an interest in what was going on there. She was a theology student. She had studied Christian theology fairly deeply, and she was also an environmentalist. And she was able to see in the Christian teachings the importance of stewardship. And she became very serious at kind of making the connections between faith teachings and environmentalism. She went to the island and spent time there, learned what she could, connected with some people, and ultimately befriended a couple of churches who agreed to let her come and speak to their congregations